Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled Rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome and welcome back, everybody.
Hey, hey, hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And this is Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Boom. Regular recipe, just the two of us vibing
Yep.
on a movie.
Shake and bake.
Exactly. Shake and bake. We'll take that over for the people.
That's what I'm doing. I'm
yeah.
taking that over. Shake and bake. It's so good to not let that die. It's shake and bake time.
Speaking of teamwork, we are talking about Spider-Man Across the Universe, the sequel to Spider-Man Into the Universe. Why am I
Into
saying
the
universe?
Spider-Verse.
It's the Spider-Verse. Wow. Yeah. Let's get that clean. We're doing Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
The sequel to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Excellent. We did it. Just edit that in properly. Yeah, I was worried. I'll have to say, because this was something I was really looking forward to, considering how much I loved Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, even if I don't remember the name of it.
Yeah.
That is one of my favorite movies in the last however many years. So
yeah,
it's a lot was riding on this, and if I'm being honest, I was not loving the trailer stuff. And not to say it was bad, I was just like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, and I think the difference is I did think Into the Spider-Verse had cool trailers, but and maybe I was just like letting that looked so distinct, and they were obviously doing versions of that in the trailers again. So I was like, yeah, I know this. So yeah, there was. Having said all that, to set up, I guess, the conversation, it was just that this had a high bar to get over.
I completely agree with you. Over the past decade, for myself, Into the Spider-Verse was like one of the most highlight films for multiple reasons, not just from a story standpoint, but visuals and everything, and just like every interpretation of those characters was just so bang on, and the approachability, and it hit a note that I don't think a lot of success has been attributed to that Spider-Man franchise over the last year of like all those things hitting at the right points, right? And having its own vibe of like, and having its very own unique vibe. Yeah, the thing for me was, could they replicate that magic, bring it in? And that was a big bar. And I completely agree with you. It's like, how do they do that? And I don't know about you, but to me, I'm like, yep, they got it. They got it. When they did that Gwen intro, and I'm like,
yes. For me, I was like, yeah, this met and exceeded my expectations realistically. So yeah, I don't say it lightly when I say I really like this movie. Like it was built up in my head. I was like ready to be kind of like underwhelmed, and no such thing happened. As you said, the Gwen intro, even something as simple as once she was actually starting to like swing, like after she had her talk with her father, and she was like just starting to web sling, I was like 10 out of 10 movie. Like it's just gonna have to like, it's going to have to do something really fucked up to start dropping points, because I was just like, I'm right back in. Like I'm right back into that feeling I felt with the first movie. As you said, we'll get into the story, but like visually, it's a movie where I'm like, I just can't wait to watch this again. Like can't like it, and I don't feel like that, especially nowadays where I can't go to the movies that often. Like I usually feel like, okay, I got to see it, great, but like with this movie, I was like, no, I really can't wait to see this again in theaters, and like enjoy just visually what is going on here. Yeah, but I guess we should go through the story, which is, I guess you don't realize until the end. It's Gwen basically telling the story of how she became part of the Spider Society, and they needed Miles to basically be okay with letting another family member die.
Hmm.
In every Spider-Man story, a chief has to die, like, or a captain has to die, and it's his turn with his dad
Hmm.
Jefferson,
Hmm.
and basically the story she feels of like betraying him and hoping to be able to make things right, and you have the great reveal at the end of who she's talking to, and you're just like,
Hmm.
all right, let's go. But yes,
Yes.
like Fast X, like Dune, like Infinity War, this is a part one at the very least. I mean, I'm assuming of two, but it's definitely a
Yes.
part one. And so yes, it does end with a to be continued.
Hmm.
I've heard some people say they didn't know that going into it, so just
Hmm.
if you're listening to this without having seen the movie, going into it, it is definitely a part one, so you will be left, like, I think, on a high note, but you will be left being like, okay, like,
Yeah.
yeah, I hope so. I don't even think it's a full year. It's supposed to come out in March of next
March
year.
of 2024. I think it's
Yeah,
like less than a full year for
yeah.
sure.
So
Um,
that's good, but yeah, you will have to wait to get a conclusion to this story.
it is definitely something to know right off the bat because it was very, very clear there was half the audience that was very vocal about not knowing
Yeah,
that that was going to happen, and then the other half that was all in like, yeah, we're let's go, like we can't wait for the next one. This is, and that's what I think this movie did really, really great, right? It didn't give us like for Fast X that idea, that jarring ending where you're like, really? You're gonna end it here? That's how I kind of felt with Fast X versus like here where I'm like, this is a great point to end it because it gives me a launching point for the next one. That's it clearly establishes what's happening and it answered so many questions of like why weren't the first spider group, spider gang, I want to call them, in the first one, why weren't they more involved in this one? And I was like, okay,
yeah.
now I get it.
Well,
That's
even the
awesome.
fact that, like, when we get into the story beats, like the fact that the Spider Society's like, no, it's only a few people. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
obviously we see there's
A select group.
I think they did a good job of being like, there are the people that are actually going out and doing shit, and then there's people who like work here, like they're just office bodies.
Admin and
But
yeah.
like, so even with that, I'm like, okay, so that means not everyone can come back. Like, I think Penny gets a
Mhm.
line, like she actually gets to be in
Correct.
the movie, but
Yeah.
like, you're like, okay, so it is select people. It's not
Hmm.
just like, it's not like, oh, we will see everyone again.
Hmm.
Um, but and I think I knew ahead of time, even though you do see him Spider Noir, that he wasn't actually in the movie. So I knew that going
Hmm.
into it. So I was surprised when I saw. I was like, I think that was part of the giddy, like, oh shit, yeah, like, okay, here we go.
For me,
Um,
yeah,
but
100%.
yes, what we're talking around is the fact that it's Gwen Stacy talking to some of the Spider-Men you met during this movie, but
Mhm.
definitely the Spider-Men you met during Into the Spider-Verse, where you're like, okay, so they would definitely be on board to help
Yeah.
Miles to come back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think another thing I was worried about was like, yeah, they really. I remember them saying like, "Don't get it twisted. The Spot is the villain of the movie," and I was like, "Oh, like
Hmm.
not." I wasn't worried about like, "Oh, who cares about the Spot?" Because like I just assumed they'll make it worth your while,
Yes.
and I think they did. To be clear, like
100%.
no ambiguity. That I think they did a very successful job with Spot, but I
Hmm.
was just like, "Oh, like." Because it seems like Miguel O'Hara is the bad guy, but then
Yeah.
I think it's, for me it worked, which was like, yes, there is a villain, the Spot, but
Hmm.
there is this other issue that Miles has to deal with, which is
Hmm.
the rejection of his spider people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
The
I think that's,
bureaucracy of it all. It's
yeah,
it's it's a really, really great. It's a battle on two fronts, and that's what I'm really excited about
yes, that
for him.
he's really got a lot on his, and they've added like a third front here with Miles
Absolutely.
G. Morales,
Yes. Yes.
which is
Battle on
great.
three fronts now.
Yeah,
And the whole like super hero facing that dark version of himself, quite literally. They're doing it all out of sequence, and I love it so
it's so
much
good.
because it's so good.
Yeah, I don't remember what I was gonna say, but I think they got all of that right in terms of,
Yes.
I understand how
Hmm.
Spot is a threat, and they set it up. He's like, yeah, and in basically in 2 days he's gonna come for your dad. Like, so you're like, okay, there's a ticking time, but there's
Yep.
other stuff that needs to get done in
Hmm.
between now and then. So to me, anyway, I don't feel like they're like, oh, well, they kind of benched the Spot. Like, it's like, yeah, we know what he's doing. He's gaining power, and it's said out loud many times. Like Miles says, yeah, he's going around, he's getting enough power so that he can beat me. Like,
he's getting more
you're
holes.
like, yeah, that's what he's doing. Now, like, here's other stuff that's happening.
Yeah, he's getting more holes. And it's a perfect way to like not sideline him, but to be like, yeah, you don't need to see him doing that. He's you saw him doing that in Mumbai or Mumbata or I can't remember the planet that Mumbattan.
And that's what's great was like you see him in Mumbattan.
Yep.
They introduced that other idea of like
these things have to happen.
The canon event. Like, I don't know if it's called a canon event, but it's a canon something.
Mm-hmm.
And Miles is being like, well, yeah, you can save both people. Like, what's going on here? And you realize slowly, like, oh, that is exactly why. It's not like, oh, Miles isn't good enough. It's like, no, that guy refuses to do things our way.
Yes.
And, like, he is the problem. Like this, he is the problem. Is that he would inspire everyone to just be like, no, I can find a way instead of letting a couple people die so that we can keep this thing going. And I think you know me, always looking at capitalist stuff, and it is name checked in this movie again when my favorite character, Spider-Punk, is looking at them like, what is that? And he's like, it's a metaphor for capitalism, and it's like this thing coming for them that might kill them. And, like, and I'm like, yeah, like that there is that capitalist idea of like, well, there's got to be losers for in order to people to be winners. And the other idea, the more inclusive idea of like, or we could try to incorporate everyone and make sure everyone gets what they need. And yeah, I know people are like, oh, who cares? It's a big corporation doing that. But I think I've said it on my other podcast on Colonize. I do think that it is still a paradigm shift because even though they don't name check communism in this or even socialism, they do purposefully make capital come out of, maybe you want to dismiss him, but he's clearly one of the better characters, Hobie Brown.
Oh God, he's
coming out of his mouth of like, ugh, I don't want to be a part of this. Like, I quit. Like, that's capitalism right at work right there. And I remember what I was going to say now, which to me, the thing being explored here is isolation and feeling isolated. You don't have to be alone to feel isolated.
100%.
And I liked, as a parent, what I really liked this time around, like, yes, this was the first movie to me was kids needing the validation from their parents, but like, and I do think maybe this is a bit selfish as a parent, but like the very real thing of you as a human being wanting to know that there's some kind of validation coming back to you about you being a good parent. And so the isolation felt of Miles being in a family and be like, oh, they just don't get me. They're riding my ass all the time. And the isolation the parents feel of like, I'm sending all this love. I'm trying to do this thing. Like, it's the speech from the trailer that hit way harder in context of the movie for me than in the trailer, which Rio talking about, like, I just want to know that, like, I'm overbearing because I know how the world is and I don't want you to feel out of place. I don't want you to feel that isolation, but like she feels isolated because she's like, well, now he's at odds with me and I don't know if he loves me, and I don't know if it's loves me back, but I don't know if I'm even doing a good job. Like some external factor needs to be validating my decisions here, even if it's not putting it on the kid. But that's what I think took it to the next level for me in this movie, is that like they were, as much as I really appreciated the like kids needing that validation from their parents to be who they want to be, it's parents are still people too, and
100%.
And it's like, if you are a good parent, I'm not saying all parents deserve this benefit. I'm saying parents that are actively trying to be there for their kids. And you know what? Yeah, like the isolation is part of the isolation is like the very real circumstance that Gwen and Miles are in, where it's like, I can't really share this part of my life with you, or I don't know how to share this part of my life with you, because, and that's what's isolating us, is that I've got this thing where like, if I do share it with you, it threatens to break us apart. And I like that because it's not what we talked about with Tom Holland or Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, where it's like, I'm doing this to protect you. It's literally like, I'm a kid and I'm dead. Like, you are a cop that is actively like, I don't like this. And Miles is in a better place with Jefferson, but like, even with his mom still just being like, I don't know, like this really could change it, because what I liked about this movie was, and again, I can see how people might frame it as selfish, is uh, Captain Stacy. I can't remember his first name, but Captain Stacy hearing, okay, so you are Spider-Gwen. So then how many years have you been lying to me about this? And just like, and Miles knowing that, like when he tells Gwen, and she's like, oh, don't tell your parents, like don't, and you're like, you get that of thing of like, yeah, well, like how do I explain away the lying and like just breaking that trust of it? And again, it is this extreme circumstance that should allow for them to be like, I get it. And I think the movie is getting at, they would come to that realization eventually. Even Captain Stacy comes to it when he's like, I quit in the middle of your speech of like why you needed to do what you needed to do. Like, it's more important to me to be your father than to be Captain Stacy.
Exactly.
Like, finding the bag. Like, I thought that was a very powerful moment. And I think that's what the movie was getting at, was like, oh, like, yeah, I understand now what you were doing and that you weren't doing it for like fucked up reasons. Like, you were trying to save the world, and like, so yeah, I'm gonna be there for you as a parent instead of like, oh, you shouldn't have done that or whatever. But like, I like that was what was keeping the isolation there, was you're a kid and you don't know like what's gonna happen when you lay this on your parents, and you already know the idea of like breaking the trust and all that. And so it was more realistic that they would keep the secret in this movie than other movies we've seen.
Yeah, and I completely agree about, and I really appreciate the fact that you highlight that it's an extreme circumstance in this situation, because Gwen says it perfectly in that scene where Captain Stacy does find out, and her first reaction is basically, could you respond to me like a dad and not a cop right now? And that's exactly the awareness that this daughter has of this cop, is that she knows him as a cop better than as a dad. Even though he's a very, very good dad, his identity is more of a cop than as a dad, right? So the reality is, she doesn't want to lose that dad aspect of him, because she knows the cop aspect is going to override that love until he can actually listen. And it's only in his isolation that he actually hears it, ruminates it, and all that kind of stuff. Now, that's a comment, obviously, on toxic masculinity and those kind of things that need to change. But the idea of like where they're at and all those kind of things, like the lie is justified. Yeah, that's how he's going to respond. That's how anyone's going to respond.
Yeah, like
if they've been lied to.
Reaction is like, oh shit, you lied to me, and then
exactly. But if you
saying, not every parent deserves this benefit, but
correct,
a parent that is actively trying to be there for you will be like, even if it takes a couple days or whatever, like they'll get there.
Yeah, because his reaction is centered around himself. Right. And that's the point, is just he would center it around him. And that's what Gwen was stopping. It's the idea that Gwen recognizes that they're both doing the same thing. And that's why I love what she says with the mask and the badge. It's like, this is my badge. Yeah, we're doing the same thing.
You're doing
it, just don't know
if you don't do it, someone else. And I know that. I mean,
exactly.
That's and giving cops a bit of a thing, but I'm just like, sure, I get it for this.
Yeah,
this I will allow.
I'll like, all right,
it's not an individual thing.
I'll let the call that as a ball instead of a strike, but whatever. Like, you know what I mean, that kind of stuff. But she had every point, and they got that relationship got to where they needed to go to, and it sucked that it suffered that it did, but she was right to hide it and hold it from them.
And
no one else could understand
when she's like clearly going to like tell not clearly, I should say, the way I was invested in the movie, I was like, oh, she can tell Miles, like, you can tell your parents, like I was wrong when I told you not to tell your parents. And then he's not in that, his universe is 1016, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not going to get caught up on the numbers for sure.
Well,
but
he wasn't in.
In that,
we're not going to get into numbers.
In that very specific situation at the end, we can be like, that's one number.
His universe, he wasn't in his.
Yeah,
and I really like that, because even when he's, I know we're just talking about the end now, but like when he's talking to his mom, and he's like, oh, like, I'm Spider-Man, and she's like, okay, like, what is that? I was like, she knows who's Spider? Like, I genuinely didn't like remember that it clearly looked different in that universe. Like, to me, before he had the conversation, I was like, it seems like it's not his universe. But then I saw it and I was like, okay, it must be. And then I thought that was really well done, and I'm so happy Mahershala Ali came back to be Aaron Davis.
Oh my God, everything about that was so good. Because during the whole movie, I'm like, they're giving us a lot of Aaron. They're giving us a lot of his the uncle, and
Yeah,
I'm
I was
like,
like, oh, does he? I hope he got paid for like they're using like his lines and stuff. I'm like, but then he
yeah.
was back. I'm like, okay, good.
I'm like,
He
all
obviously
right,
got
good,
paid.
good, good. Yeah, yeah. That I was really worried about that. I'm like, that feels off to me. It was all for a good fake out. I'm very, very effectively done. But
Um,
there,
but yeah, sorry. What we're explaining is at the end of the movie, during the movie, they set up that in that Spider Hub place for the Spider Society, they've got this machine that can look at your DNA and it'll send you back to your universe based on your DNA. But since he had the spider from this time, I will say it's from Universe 42.
yeah.
It took that DNA and sent him to 42, even
Hmm.
though that's not actually where he should be. That's why he still glitches in the thing. But like, it's like he they basically set that up. So then he gets sent back to 42 instead of where he should be, and you see the world where there is no Spider-Man because he never got bit by that spider.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and
And
instead he became the Prowler. Miles G. Morales became the Prowler, and
yeah,
and Aaron Davis is just his like sidekick or like
he's
henchman.
just like, I'm the
'Cause
guy
he's
that's
like, oh no,
gonna.
I'm not
I
the
think he's the
Prowler.
guy in the chair.
Yeah, he
That
must be.
he must be the guy
He's
in
like,
the
right,
chair.
because you
Yeah.
got the plan, right? And I'm like, why would
Yeah.
he like? At that point, I knew it wasn't his universe, but I was just like, also like, wait,
Mhm.
what? Like, why?
But I'm like, why does the
why would
glove
he trust him
fit
with like, oh, it's at
you?
6, right? And I'm like, what? Why are you trusting this kid? And then you're like, oh no, he's the henchman or guy in the chair, like whatever,
Yeah, yeah,
however
yeah.
you want to place it. And you're like, oh, okay, okay. So he knew something was up already when it was like, oh, you don't know the details. Also,
Yeah.
that's not. And that was another nice subtle hint of, oh, you changed your hair. I was like, what? And I
Yeah,
just thought
yeah.
like, oh,
You
because
took
he
out
was
your
in a
braids.
fight
Was
or
great.
whatever.
Mhm.
It's not as coiffed as it could have been because he just came from like that crazy place.
Yeah.
When the mom says it, but then when he goes, "Oh, your braids," I'm like, okay, so
Wait
they're
a
really
minute.
double like obvious. Like,
Yeah.
by that point, it's obvious, but it was like a nice reminder again of like, okay, confirming he's in a different universe, but also now Aaron
Mhm.
Davis has reason to be like, okay, so you're not my guy.
Yeah, because the hair touch was really, really nice. Because you're right. I'm like, oh yeah, maybe he combed it out different. But then
Mhm.
when he was like braids, I'm like, hold up, that's entirely
Yeah, like
different.
that's
And he never
way
had
too.
braids.
Yeah.
I'm like, this some, and then he was just like, but at that point, I'm just like, hold up, that's Prowler saying this. There's something going on here. This
Mhm.
is really, really good. But I love the fact that we're like so in love with this movie that we're just spewing our love all over the place. What's basically happening here is that there the fight between the Miguel thing. Like I love that fake out. Every fake out here is amazing. Everything.
I
Think
guess
you
we
know
could
what's
start
going
from the
on?
beginning.
You don't know what's going on.
We can
Yeah.
start from the beginning. So basically, Gwen, really effectively, I think they start off with Gwen, and she's
Yes.
depressed. Like she's in a group, she's playing in the Mary Janes,
Mhm.
and she's just off in her own world because she can't relate to anyone else
Yeah.
because she had this great experience with
Mhm.
the Spider-Man in
Mhm.
Miles' universe, but then they all had to split up. Well, I guess they didn't all have to split up. We don't know
Well, they
that
did.
part yet. Well, no, because she still gets to hang out with Peter B and Penny and stuff. She just
Only with
oh, I
the
guess not
thing
at
though.
that point. Not
Yeah.
at that point. She hadn't been introduced to the thing. So yes, she is. You're right. At that
Mhm.
point, she has this separation thing because one, she's had this experience with other Spider-Man, but two, like
There's no
there
way
are
back
no other
to
heroes.
each
Like
other.
it's again, like it's still not like there's other heroes. I guess like she is the only hero in her universe. I
Right.
assume so. It's like you're missing your friends, but you're also missing the capacity to have that camaraderie with anyone else.
Yeah. And it's also knowing that they are out there and that they're safe and that they want to be together too. It's just
Although
like,
I'm pretty
hey,
sure Spider Bite is in her universe. Like the girl at the end that's like, oh, I play the drums. Like they don't really
oh,
hang.
she's
they don't
AI.
really-
I figure she's everywhere though.
No,
Because she's safe to be everywhere.
She uses AI, but I think she is a physical person. She's not AI.
I know, but she's a physical person in a different dimension
Well,
or a
I'm
different
saying I don't
universe
think so.
or something like that, right?
I'm
Really?
saying I don't think so. I'm saying
Because I don't even think she's in the New
because she
York
said
location.
I'm back home
Yeah.
in Fritos, but I
Yeah.
think she was there with Spider Gwen. Like
Interesting.
I think that was the girl that was like, hey, I can play drums because it's
Mhm.
like it's a weird line to end on. I think they're setting up. Oh, that's.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
I think she had the capacity to actually have another connection with another spider person in that universe, but again, they have to stay isolated.
Gotcha. I
But
do
think,
also love the subtle fact that she is the drummer in the band, and I think that's important for how she recruits the band in the end because
yeah,
this drummers usually tie everything together. So I
yeah,
think that's a really, really great character development aspect that they
I
built
loved
into that.
I loved everything about it. She's
Mhm.
like, yeah, I have a band, but it's whatever. And then she's like, finally got the band she wants, like
Yes.
with all her spider people. But yeah, um, so yeah, she goes off. She's home, and
Mhm.
I don't know that I thought they implied that she just was around when uh Peter Parker in her world died, but I didn't realize it was like she might feel a bit of responsibility because she
Oh, she
had a
caused
full
it,
on
yeah.
fight with him, and like obviously she didn't kill him, but like
Mhm.
they were having a fight and she didn't know who he was,
Yeah.
and that the dad blames Spider Woman. I keep calling her Spider Gwen.
Yeah.
The
But they
dad
call her
thought,
Spider Woman in that
yeah,
universe,
yeah, no,
though.
that's what I'm saying. I should
Yeah.
say Spider
It's
Woman, not
great.
Spider Gwen.
Yeah.
That he blames Spider Woman. Then I'm like, oh, that is like an extra thing of
Mhm.
that she brings up. She's like, do you honestly think I'm a murderer? Like, that's what you think of me? Like, now that you know it's me, like, you're sticking to this thinking that I'm a murderer?
Mhm.
Like, shouldn't you see me and be like, oh, it's my daughter, not a murderer?
Yeah, can't be murder. And also the idea of like this is what police work. Like this is terrible police work. It's just okay. Honestly, she was hunched over holding Peter in her arms. Does that scream murderer to you? No.
Yeah, I
That
mean,
does
yeah.
not scream murderer. There's no like this is terrible police work on
Well,
his
that's
part.
what I like in comparison to Jefferson, who
Yes.
seems more connected. He sees the same thing with Spider-Man
Mhm.
over the Prowler, but by the end of that movie, he still is cheering Spider-Man on, like, "Oh, go!" Instead of being like, "No, you're a murderer, obviously."
Exactly.
Obviously.
Exactly. He's just like, no, I've taken in enough information. I've actually done the work. He's like, yeah, it looks bad in the beginning. I have questions and you
But
ran
you
away.
couldn't
That doesn't look
possibly be
good.
the person that killed him.
Exactly. Because I got there because I took in new data and this guy's just like, nope, you're a murderer. I get because you ran away and that's it. And I'm like, what a bunch of crappy police work.
Yeah. But yeah, so basically they set up that tension. Then another amazing Yorma Tacone like villain in Renaissance Vulture.
Oh yeah, that was great. That animation.
I loved that anime. I thought that was, and like just that he would go in and out of Italian. I was
Yep.
like, this is great.
This
This is so
it's
fun.
So yeah.
But she's kind of, no, I don't know if she's in over her head, but she definitely needs help, and that's when Miguel and or Jess Drew Spider Woman come
Yep.
to help out.
Yep. It's a
And
very,
you
very
learn-
funny interaction. She does the thing where she finds out she's pregnant and then awkwardly says, "Can you adopt me?"
Yeah.
Because she's cool.
Or when Miguel's like, I'm from a, she's like, wow, okay, yeah, I'm not surprised at all. Let's move on. Like,
We all
you
are.
Yeah, like,
It's
oh,
like,
you are.
I'm Spider-Man. It's like we all are Spider-Man. It's great. But
yeah,
this is the best part of this movie. It was this part of this movie where I'm like, oh my God, the movie just begun. And it was like this whole Gwen sequence alone was so effective and amazing. I'm like, we just begun the movie. We're gonna have such a wild ride.
They do the Miles stuff before they actually do the opening credits.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, you learn basically like Jess Drew Spider Woman pushes Miguel to be like, let Spider Gwen be a part of this. I'm sorry,
Out of
I called her
pity.
Spider Gwen again, but like,
No, she is Spider Gwen though. We know her
they
as
don't call her
Spider
that,
Gwen.
though.
They don't
Obviously,
call her
it
that,
wouldn't
but we
work
call
if
her
she called herself
Spider
Spider Gwen.
Gwen. No, but for all intents and purposes for this podcast, we
Yeah.
gotta be
Yeah, she's Spider.
calling her Spider Gwen. Yeah.
But yeah, like I really liked that. Just the beginning putting on Miguel, like, you know why she can't be a part of this, like,
Mhm.
and
That was amazing too.
just really everyone is aware of the connection between Miles and Gwen. The even Spider-Man India is like, wow, like, how do you guys get anything done together? Like, this sexual tension.
This tension is so palpable. It was great.
But just yeah, like, it's like, yeah, she's not gonna be down for that. And I guess they worked her because she was down to like set him up.
And here's the thing I don't get. If they knew at that point what his connection to Miles was, why would they send her specifically to Miles's universe to monitor the spot? Like solo. Like it's weird. I know I'm jumping ahead there, but like
I think
weird.
the idea is that like it was supposed to be a 2-for-1. Like, oh wait, did they? I can't remember. I thought that at some point, I could be wrong. I thought at some point Jess drew Spider Woman imply like what she said implied that she was like, you weren't supposed to see him, but I was obviously aware that you were going to do it, and that was going to help us like loop him in. Like, yes, you're supposed to be getting the spot. That's the anomaly you have to get. But I got the sense that she was like, like on the side here, we both know you're going to try and. But I might be giving the movie too much credit. Maybe I'm wrong. I thought that there was one thing of dialogue that implied that made me infer that she was always like, well, if he sees her, this will be the train will get moving. Like we'll get him on board because it'll be a friendly face to do it, even though their closer was always going to be Peter B. That like she'll at least get him like on board with this, and then and that Miguel probably wouldn't want to do that because he would know like, hey, it doesn't matter what their connection. She's never gonna like get it done properly. And Jessica Drew was just being like, no, I'm sure she could. I'm sure she could. That is what I got out of it. That it wasn't actually a consensus that they wanted her to set him up. That
fair enough.
She thought like, she probably could get it done.
Yeah, it just seems like to me it was less of a democracy at Spider-Verse headquarters and more of a Miguel operation. So for Miguel to be like, yeah, okay, I'll trust you on this, even though there's a very, very big potential danger that this could it seemed a little bit questionable, especially establishing at the beginning where it's like, you know why she can't be here. And I'm like, and afterwards you're like, oh, that's a good reason why she can't be there. That's a good point.
Think the other problem they had was they didn't think the Spot was actually that capable. That's true. That was the big thing when she's like, "You lost him." I thought you said this was like a villain of the week thing. Like that was the big thing for Jess Drew. Was like, what the like. Right. We obviously wouldn't have put you on this if he was if we knew what we were getting into.
Because they were monitoring him for the potential of him being able to get into that thing.
I think he had gotten up to speed a little too quick for them.
Yes. Yeah, he figured out his own powers a bit too fast.
Yeah.
And that was, by the way, that opening robbery was really, really funny. Yeah, so I can't wait to get there.
Yeah, it's before we see Spider-Gwen join Miles, you just see like, okay, she's part of the Spider Society now. She's been outed to her dad. The dad didn't react the way you'd want right away. So she's like, I don't know how to fix this. And you get the sense that all of them have had that situation. So they're like, whatever, just, let's bring her on board. And then we cut to Miles, who is supposed to be at this meeting to like go over universities with his parents, and he's got caught up trying to fight the Spot in a very funny way, and also I thought in a fun way of showing how much he's like gained confidence in his own skills.
Yes, like his quip and all that kind of stuff in the thing where he's just like, I'm gonna heat up a beef patty right now. I'm gonna eat it while he's like, I'm gonna make this commentary. So why do people call it an ATM machine? I love that because that same bit comes back to bite him later, and I love it. It's so good.
Yeah, this was all good stuff. I was a big fan of that. And when he was like, it starts off with like, how much for the beef patty? And he's like, if you get him, it's on the house. And then, like, halfway through, the guy's like, maybe you just pay me now.
It's like, yeah, that'll be $1.50.
Seems like this isn't gonna go that way. You need to give me the money now.
I love the whole thing where the Spot's trying to be like, you see, I'm stealing the money from the ATM people. It's not even yours. Like, I'm not stealing from you. That's a victimless crime. It's like, no, you're stealing from me. It's just so funny. The whole thing. I loved it.
He's like, hey, by the way, how's the ATM machine work? Please don't tell me. Like, and he's like, okay, good. Here we go. But yeah, they did a kind of an MCU thing where it's like, oh, the Spot is the result of what the events of Into the Spider-Verse. He was at the Collider thing. He's the guy that got hit by a bagel. Yeah, a scene I think everyone loves where he gets hit and instead of like smack, it says bagel.
And obviously bagels are really, really important. And I think they say this is like doing and I got to watch Everything All at Once at the same time, because there's a bagel theory there about time travel. I think that a lot of people are being like, yeah, they're linking it to that. I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's cool that there's that physics thing that's making its way into pop literature.
Well, I would say this. you should see the movie. I know I didn't get the sense it was about time travel, but yeah,
No.
you should see it. It's great.
I love
And
that
there is a
movie.
reference
It's
to the
so
movie
good.
in this movie as
Yes.
well. Someone has a poster, but it's not.
Yeah.
Obviously, doesn't say everything everywhere all at once. It says something
Yeah,
else, but
it's something like all like it's kind of
It's
like a
fine, yeah.
knockoff
I don't know.
version. It's a spoof or
It's
parody, but
yeah.
it's paying homage to it, and I love it. But go watch everything all at once. It's such a good movie. But yeah, they talk about bagels and time paradoxes there. Good times.
Yeah. So then they kind of set up this thing that I thought was interesting that really pulled Rio into focus in this movie because she kind of has like 2 or 3 lines in the first movie.
Yeah.
But like the guidance counselor after the meeting is kind of like, he's lying to you. And I like that Rio's first was Jeff. Nah, he would. And I was like, it's interesting
Your
because in the
son.
comics I read of Miles Morales, that is a problem. Is that Jefferson actually does know, and so then when Rio finds out that he's Miles, it's like, oh, he lied to me and my husband lied to me,
Right.
and like it causes this thing. So I was like, oh, that's interesting that would be her first thing, but then like, oh no, your son, and then again, that's what pulls her in. It's like and it's not like, oh, really? She's like, oh, other people can see that he's lying to me too. Because she's like, yeah, he's lying to you.
Yeah. Yeah. That sucks when other people like when you lie to yourself about something, but other people
But like
can
other
see
people
the
like,
truth
no,
about
no.
it.
He's lying, and I know he's lying.
Yeah,
It's
and
not
they call
just,
you out on it.
It's not just
good
like, hey,
anymore.
did you notice your son lies to you? It's like, no. I can see you letting him lie to you.
Yep. You're enabling this at this point. It's
um,
and she kind of does it later on when she ungrounds him for a little bit too. She's like, oh yeah, well, I'll walk back this, but I mean, like, that is what it is. That was a good scene of
I
parenting
think
and all
what's
those.
good about that scene is she's meeting him where he's ready to talk to him, right?
Yes.
Like, she gave him the chance. Like, what do you? And she see like great. Just there's so many scenes that don't involve like. It is great animation throughout. Don't get me wrong, but like, there's so many things that aren't like, oh, like this is gonna be like a wordy thing, so we better do something cool with the animation. It's just like, no, just solid animation and let the emotion of the scene be the special effect. And I think in that scene of like her, like he's about to say it, and like there's no words being said. It's just like he's building up the thing to be like, because I'm Spider-Man, and then he doesn't do it, and then she's like, again, I'm gonna get lied to. It just sucks. And again, that isolation we're talking about, that they both feel isolated by this situation, and so she's like, fuck it, like there's somewhere you want to be that you don't want to tell me about. Here is why things have been the way they are. I'm gonna be open with you, like maybe you. And I think part of and when you come back, you better come back. I think that's the, like, maybe you'll feel more comfortable talking to me about this.
Yeah.
Now that you know where my overbearingness comes from, or whatever you're interpreting as overbearingness, this is where it's coming from. And I'm hoping that, like, and I think it shows that she knows her kid. So it's like, you're not up to something shitty. Like, I don't think that's what it is. It's just, you're not telling me what it is, and that sucks. So whatever it is you're doing, like, I know he says earlier, like, oh, we can meet these scientists that know how to do, like, whatever the science is. But, like, I think she knows it's not just that, too. So
of course.
So it's like, look, whatever you're into is important to you, and you need to be able to explore that. And I know enough to know that you're not doing something shitty, but, like, it is going to be something we have to talk about, and I'm going to start the process of meeting you where you're comfortable talking about it.
Yeah. Like, because obviously I'm not a parent, so I don't know anything about parenting. But to me, that was just like, this is a very effective good cop, bad cop scenario where the cop in the scenario literally had to be the one yelling, and then the good cop was like, listen, I thought the good cop routine is going to work. You're going to tell me. You clearly aren't. But at least I'd rather have a happy, fulfilled son as opposed to an isolated, depressed son and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to connect with you with empathy right now. And eventually, when you're ready, you'll talk. I thought that was just so beautiful. It was such a beautiful thing. Like, I cried so much, man. It was great. It was great. I was like, fuck. If I had that kind of parenting.
Exactly. And it's, like, that's why I like the first movie is like, it's more about like the effects of parenting. Like, what I said, like, to me, yeah, if my dad thinks I can do something, then I do have the like
Oh, 100%.
confidence to be like, oh, okay, then I probably can do it. The same way Miles wasn't really clicking until it was his dad being like, there's something in you special, and I know it's, and like he hears that confirmation from the validation from his dad, and then it's like, this movie was just like, they can't speak about it for the reasons we've talked about it, but it's like, look, I don't want to fuck with you. I don't want to be riding your ass. Sure. I want you to feel as comfortable at home as you do in these spaces that you're going to be in.
Yeah.
And to not like, that is exactly how I feel. As I'm not a parent to a teenager, I know that's going to be a big deal later, but like, just like, yeah, you don't want people to be able to like pick on your kid and have them feel down about themselves.
Of course.
Again, just for the rest of the podcast, I just mean parents who are actually involved and really,
yeah,
I don't mean every parent wants this. That can't possibly be true.
Yeah.
But every parent who is trying, I'm assuming, is doing a version of this, and that it would be nice. And I don't think that it's fair to put that on the kid to validate you, but that when you are a parent, you do live in that kind of isolation that superheroes might, where it's like, well, there is it really only goes the one way. Like I pour the love into them. They genuinely do not owe me anything back as my kid.
Hey,
but
it's
like,
rough.
But I do need, like, am I doing the right thing? I think that is as much of validation as you can really be looking for, and for it to come from somewhere. It doesn't need to, like, again, I think it's a bit much to put that on your kid to give that back to you, but I still think that it was an interesting way of looking at the isolation a parent would feel, because it isn't going to come from your kid, especially in this. Even if he wasn't a superhero, it wasn't going to come from the kid that way. Like, you could say I love you, but you know that, like, if you took away car privileges on a very special night, that love you could be like, I fucking hate you, you're the worst, right? Like, you know how fickle that is. So it is more like, like, I need to know I'm doing the right thing the same way the kid needs to know they're doing the right thing, and that doesn't stop because you become a parent. And I thought that was really what got me this time around.
I mean, the thing that got me was seeing his dad and the insecurity about, like, how he's acting and all that kind of stuff. Like, am I doing the right? And, like, in him getting that validation from Rio and all that kind of stuff. I mean, like, we're going to do this. And then, he tries to do it. It was like, I got to take off for this superhero or supervillain incident, but we're going to get through this. And I love the fact that he does that in that thing. It's like, I got to jet it, but I got to take a moment to really, really be present and communicate with you. Like, we got this together. We're a team. Like, I love the fact that he does this. Like, and he shows his insecurity about, whether or not he's doing the right thing, and everything about that, when they have that bonding moment where, and I love the fact that Miles says, is like, I know men of your generation have a hard time with their mental health and opening up. And then he does open up, and they have that bonding moment where they see each other's insecurities and everything like that. It's such a great thing.
Get off the kid's ass.
Maybe. That was so really funny. And to me, I was just like thinking to myself after the movie, if there are any families with teenagers that watch this together, I wonder how much of this movie had helped them have a lot of those conversations. You know what I mean? To help them see things the other way, or I don't know. But like, to me, I'm just like,
my hope is that it's more like you see that, and as a younger kid, maybe younger than, because maybe by teenage it's too late or whatever. Like, if you haven't already instilled that,
right, preventing it
that, like,
getting there,
you can see a model for, like, all right, this is how you're there for your kid. And, because again, maybe the movie is trying to, but I don't think it is. Like, I don't think it would be right to be like, and kids, make sure you tell your parents they're doing right. It's like, you genuinely don't know your parents. Like,
no,
it's not like, hey, like, make me alive, please. Like, that's not part of the deal. So it's like, it is just a nice kind of, like, maybe not nice, but it's a nice acknowledgement that there is 100%. That isolation you feel as a parent. That, like, it is this love that you put out there, and it's very hard to know if you're doing it the right way, and there's no one really to validate it back to you.
Yeah, and it's selfish to expect it back, right? And that's a challenge I see with a lot of people and all that kind of stuff. And to me, like, I went through this journey and did validate a lot of what my mom did and all this kind of stuff, and also been like,
as
hey,
an adult,
didn't
right? Like,
yeah, as an adult,
yeah, like
and
that's the thing.
it was great.
It comes,
but
later.
I'm so sure that she would have loved it tenfold more when I was actually a 16-year-old piece of crap. You know what I mean? It's just like when I did validate it for her, like as a 30-year-old, she was like overwhelmed and couldn't handle it. And I'm just like, go thank your parents for the shit that they had to deal with. Because the one thing I said to her was like, listen, I know you've done a lot for me, but the biggest thing you've done for me is tolerate my shit. And like, she just, it was great. So I completely get it. It's like, parents shouldn't expect it, but when it comes,
it's great.
It's the greatest gift. It's got to be the greatest gift to be like, your kid knows what you went through. It's
we haven't gotten into the story other than how much I really love that aspect of it. But basically that happens. The movie starts in earnest. They do the music, and basically what starts off is this story of Gwen needing to Miles pulls himself in. He moves into invisible mode. He goes through the portal, and that's when they go to Mumbattan, and they meet. And I love how he's like, no, I'm having a great time. I don't put much effort into my hair. I have a great girlfriend. I'm really I don't have to try at school, but I do. Like, it's like, he's like, I'm having a good time. And I like that, like, that's just because he hasn't come up against this event or canon event. It's like, oh shit, like,
this is what
there was a lot of
Spider-Man
pain
looks like.
waiting for you, actually. Like, you were just having a good time. And I think that's interesting that it was just like, oh, you just haven't hit your event moment or your canon event yet. You like,
it's like every Spider-Man needs to have that trauma of needing that decision, because that was the biggest thing in this scene, was like, that was what felt weird. And that's what I was liked about Miles. Like, no, we can do both. Spider-Man always finds a way. I'm like, no, Spider-Man never finds a way. You're the only Spider-Man that's ever found. I'm like, oh, I get what they're doing with this movie now. And like, it was so
because there's
effective.
no Miles in the Spider Universe. I didn't
exactly
see like Miles.
Yeah, and then like every Spider-Man, you think through every Spider-Man story. It's like, no, every other. This is the one that actually does find a way to do both. Most Spider-Men have to do that sacrifice thing. Like, he did, but that wasn't a sacrifice. That wasn't a decision. He just lost someone. This is most Spider-Men are in the situation of, do I have to save Mary Jane or the school bus of kids or something like that? It's usually something like that that Spider-Man has to deal with. He hasn't yet.
In that the scenario you gave, they still save everyone. The idea isn't it's not a sacrifice. I mean, it's only a sacrifice because Miguel told them, hey, you can't save this person because it's a canon event. But otherwise, if he never told them that, they would have found a way, because that is Spider-Man. He finds a way. It's just like, Spider-Man doesn't lose Mary Jane. He loses Gwen Stacy. That's a loss.
Right.
Like, but that's not a sacrifice either. He just didn't figure out the webbing properly.
He loses Mary Jane into Force. He does later on.
Right, but again, not a sacrifice. Like, I mean...
Oh, that's a sacrifice for sure. He chose to be a Spider-Man instead of a husband. Spider-Man,
but like, what I mean is, she's not dead. You lose her into Force. Right. She's alive. She can live her life arguably happier. What I'm saying is, like, the Uncle Ben thing is on him in the sense that he made a selfish choice, but it's not like he wasn't like knowingly being like, well, yeah, I'd rather, which is what Miguel is kind of saying, like, yeah, you got to give someone up, but like, that's the capitalism part of like, yeah, like we got to have some losers here. But that isn't actually that's not the Spider-Man story. It's not like he knowingly was like, well, I will lose Uncle Ben, but at least I won't have to help this asshole here.
Yeah. You're right, because the difference between Miles and everyone else is Miles is aware of what needs to happen. Everyone else, it just happens to him. So it's like, when he's actually trapped in that cage that Miguel puts him in the end, you feel that isolation. It's like, wait, why am I the only one that has to be aware of this happening in order for me to do this? Everyone else it just happened to, and retroactively you got to deal with that. Now I have to watch it
Yeah,
happen.
you're asking. It's more. You're doing it more fucked up to me because I'm
100%.
aware of it now, and now you're telling me to just sit back and watch it. He's like,
Yeah.
none of you would just sit back and watch it if
Yeah.
you knew it was going to happen.
And
And everyone can be like, "Oh, I would," but it's not like
yeah.
they don't actually have the chance to do it.
And the worst part about it too is like they would all expect him to be like, yeah, you have to be okay with this. We're gonna sign you onto the Spider-Verse now. After you have to trade your dad for membership into this, basically. And that's just like, what? How do you have that kind of relationship afterwards? No, you're asking me to kill my father. Like, I can't be okay being here afterwards. Like, no.
Yeah. But yeah, they also set up this thing that I liked, which was Gwen has made a connection with Hobie
Yes.
Brown, Spider Punk.
Mhm.
Just everyone like gets along with him. Well, the people he wants to get along with, because he gets along with Spider-Man India. He gets along obviously with Gwen, and there's just always this thing of like, oh, you left your jumper at my place. How many jumpers do you have? She's like, it's fine. Don't worry about that. And like, and that like he is. Who know? I don't know what Spider-Punk wanted with Gwen, but that he immediately wants to help Miles is very interesting, and that he's a black person is very interesting to me. Like, I really love Daniel Kaluuya in this role, but like just
he's
the
awesome
way that he
in
was
this
like,
role.
"Hey, I noticed you were trying to do the electric thing. It's not your fingertips. You got to use your whole
Palms,
palm."
yeah.
And like it comes back, or the idea of like, why don't you just make your own like
Band or
universe
like,
thing?
yeah.
Like, which he does, and he gives to Gwen because how could he know to give it to Miles? But it was just like. Yeah, like and I like that he's just like, anyway, by the way, I'm out. Like this, I
quit.
now
I'm
that I
just
see
not
what
part
you
of
guys
this
are doing,
fascism.
like
Yeah.
fuck this shit.
Yeah.
And that he's part of the band that she puts together to help Miles. That you're like, so he will do like. Not that you ever thought he wouldn't do the right thing. He is a Spider-Man. It's not like he's not like an anti-hero, but it is just like, oh no, like he knows what's right and he's doing the right thing here, and I really appreciated that.
I was really looking forward to him and his relationship with Gwen in the sense where they're both punk rock and that anti-establishment aspect of punk rock and all the little jokes where he's like, oh yeah, I'm anti-PM and all that kind of stuff, made all these really, really good British quips. I'm like, this is a great character to have here. It's almost like him being a part of the Spider like squad was just out of place to begin with, and now he's a part of the band. You're like, yeah, this is an anti-establishment band. It's not that he's a libertarian, isolated, whatever. He's just anti-establishment of like anti-corruption, anti-whatever, and at the purest core, it's just like, yeah, at the end of the day, when you're punk rock, that ends up being very isolating because everything in itself is very capitalistic. It has an agenda, whatever, and punk rock doesn't. It's just rebel, right? So I love the isolation aspect because I love this part of it. He's the only character that's isolated but comfortable and confident in it, which is why it's just like when he takes off, why are you even cooler when you're taking off the mask and all this kind of stuff?
This is cool.
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, because you're authentic, you're genuine, you're vulnerable, you're you. You don't care. This is awesome. Like, I love those commentaries on these characters.
Some good stuff. I think that's what I liked about this movie. This isn't to put the first movie down at all. I'm just saying, I felt a deeper connection to the new people they introduced. Like as I said, even Spider-Man India, even though he comes in strong with these jokes, it's just like, well, he's the first Spider-Man we see that has to like come up against like kind of knowing that there is a canon event that's going to fuck him up, and that like we haven't said it already, but if you ruin that universe can get eaten up, and you see that there was a time where Peter B and Miguel were helping a universe that was getting eaten up, and like, so it's not just like, hey, do it or else. It's like, hey, do it or else a bit this whole universe gets gobbled up.
Yeah, it's the traditional like trade one life to save a world, or like trade the world to save one life argument, or like that ethics or morals argument, or with a train or a diverting or whatever it is.
So that is it. So it's not just, hey, it's easy for them to do it because it already happened to them, so they don't really have a say. It's more like, Yeah, but they also know what the alternative is.
Exactly.
So it's like that is why they're pushing, and that's why you can't really push them as the villain. Like Spot is it like someone? I won't say who it was.
Mm-hmm.
I heard someone be like, "Well, it's not really any villains." Like, no, Spot is a villain. Like he could have just reached out and been like, "I need help," but he's like, "Nah, I'm just gonna rob people." And also, he actively was like, "I want to be your nemesis." Like, he was. It
says the
wasn't like,
words.
I'm the hero of the story. It was like, nah, people, I'm gonna fuck with you. I'm gonna ruin your life.
Yeah, everything he says is like, so you won't forget who I am, so you'll know. Like this, everything the Spot does is classic villain stuff. It's like purely selfish.
Like
he
wants power. Whereas
he wants. I blame you for ruining my life. I do this. I do this. I like, it sucks that you were in that room. Could you establish the fact that maybe Spider-Man had to do that to save the universe? Like, it's these kind of things.
I think that's what saves the Spider Society from me being like, they're gonna be like full-on villain. It's like, it is a hard place to be in. Like, and I think that's what makes the movie interesting is that you put them in this position where they're like, well, this is what happens if you ruin too many canon events.
Yeah.
And you also completely understand Miles being like, that just can't be the right way to do this.
Yeah.
You gotta figure something else out. You can't just ask me to let someone die, especially if it's a family member, but like in general, you can't just be like, just let them die.
Yeah, but you know what? I think the funny thing is, where they leave Miles at the end of this is like they leave him in the world, obviously 42, where his original Spider came from, where that world does not have a Spider-Man, and you see the reckoning that leaves New York in, right? So he's forced to confront the idea of like, oh yeah, now I have to reckon with the fact that I came from a universe that was very privileged and born into privilege with the Vision School and all this kind of stuff. He's doing things with a lot more. He's in a position that like not a lot of people have been in, and it's just, how does he do it? It's weird to look at it from the perspective of, yeah, you come from a world where there was one Spider-Man already, a really good Spider-Man, and I love that spin of you're the original anomaly. You weren't supposed to happen.
Yeah. And maybe then we wouldn't be in this. And I like that. I didn't cry, but I almost did. Was like he ended the movie with ended the first movie with confidence, and throughout this movie, you saw that he was confident and that he was losing that, and I just felt so bad for him that he worked so hard in the first movie to be like, no, I deserve to be here, and then to like have those words in his head while he's trying to like do the web slinging, which I feel like we all interpret as them being able to clear their head and be themselves for once, and he can't do it while he's web slinging, and he's like got that bogged down in his head again. But I like that when he's trying to talk to his mom, the confidence comes back. But like just for that moment, I was like, that's so sad that like, if anything, like that would be the saddest part of this movie is that he loses that confidence, and not in a way of like, oh, now we're back to square one, but it was just, that's a very good way to take the confidence back. Take it away from him again, is just lay it out exactly the way Miguel did.
Yeah, and in many ways it pulls it back to that scene with Rio, was the idea of like, oh, New Jersey, you're gonna go to New Jersey, like away from Brooklyn. The idea that she knows is like, hey, we've been building you up, we've been hyping you up your whole life, and to succeed in Brooklyn, because your community, your environment, your culture, it reflects that, where it doesn't have the same boundaries that other places obviously do, talking about a people of color kind of bureaucracy kind of thing. And rightfully so, that's the exact same thing that happens, goes out literally out of Brooklyn into a different multiverse. And that's exactly what like that mismatch of like, I'm super confident in Brooklyn because I've been hyped up beyond belief, and I have that confidence, and I do everything. And then to see, you're stepping out there, and for Rio's big speech to be right, it's like, I don't want the world to make you feel like you don't belong. And the fact that they do that successfully by the end of it,
Miguel does
it's
everything.
rough.
It also hurts, obviously, that Peter B and Gwen were in on like what that was going to look like eventually. Not from the beginning, as we've already kind of established, but eventually it gets to the point where like, oh yeah, you two are going to be the one, you're the closer, so you're going to get him to just be okay with this. It was to soften the blow or whatever, but like that it's like, oh wow, like that's what you guys weren't there for me. You just like decided
you're here to help that agenda as opposed to, and I like when he's like,
it's like he's got these like the negative thoughts in his head, and it's not even like I if I only could talk to Gwen or Peter B, it's like I can't even talk to them really because like he's rightfully like,
How do you trust them?
understandably upset at them.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's just like, so you heard his plan and you were okay with it and you voted and now you're helping him.
Yeah,
And this is why, and when he says at the end of the movie, he's like, this is why you haven't contacted me.
mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I felt that. I felt that so bad. I'm like, yeah, the isolation bit, I'm so glad you put that in there. The theme here is isolation. And now, obviously, the theme for the next one is get the band together because she starts off this movie by quitting her band, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going into isolation. And now she's put together a new band. So, I mean, that's how you get out of isolation, right? You connect, you find your community, you find your band. And
but
yeah,
as I was saying, when he's speaking to the Earth 42 mom, like he's like, I mean, they all came for me, but I still beat them. Like I was tested and I was strong enough that I was like, I'm so glad that like he's still building that back up and like he was shook for a moment, but I got out of it. I was able to do it. That I was like, okay, good. I'm glad that he has that. Like now it'll be more about mending the relationships, but it is
100%.
like that it was effective to me at the very least that he lost for that little bit the confidence he had.
Yeah,
I remember that being such an upsetting thing for me in the first movie when they were like, Miles, get up, Miles, and like he couldn't really do what he needed to do. And I was like, yeah, man. And obviously, I'll say it again, that his dad kind of being that final factor that brought it all together is beautiful. But I thought that like it was still interesting to revisit that. Like, okay, sure, but now what happens when like the people that you were yearning to reconnect with, like at the beginning of this movie, don't really show up for you the way you thought they would?
Yeah. Because I'm, you know what? Like honestly, I love that you brought that up because seeing anyone feeling like they finally belong somewhere and feeling them confident and using that energy for good, like Miles does, it's a beautiful, glorious thing. It's one of the most amazing things ever for someone to find their confidence and feel like they belong in their community when they felt just confused or out of place or whatever. It's such a beautiful thing. And then now we're putting them in a state where, oh, this is rough emotionally because we've all been there. We've all felt isolated, like we don't belong. And it's, I'm glad that you brought that up because this isolation aspect of this whole movie is so effective because everyone in this movie is isolated. The Spot,
like the Spot,
all the Spider-Men, and how Miguel chooses to be.
Like I know it seems like a one-off thing, but like that is like right away the first villain is like, what the fuck is this? Like I'm in this world and like it's jokes, but it is funny that he's like, and this is what you guys consider art now? Like this is fucked. Like
that was funny.
I was already a bad guy, but now I'm fucking pissed. Like this is like just right away. Like I mean, it already did it with Gwen very effectively, but then I guess that's what I like about when we take a look at what these movies are exploring. Isn't just like, hey, like they should be doing 10 different things. It's like you can have the one idea, but like how many ways are you exploring it and to make it feel like this fresh, relevant thing throughout. Like I think that really helps me connect with a movie. And as I said, we just did Fast X. I don't give a fuck about that shit. Like I had a good time with that movie. I gave it a high mark. I genuinely do not care. It was just more like I got what I wanted out of the movie.
Yeah, let's have fun.
This movie is doing something different. I know it's still in the superhero, like people can fly, people can do that, but it was just like this movie is obviously trying to talk about something, and I really appreciated that. Even though it's like a seemingly simple idea is isolation, but like how many amazing ways to like a funny way, like the Vulture when he's fighting and he's like in a new world, language barriers, and just even like culturally, like what this like this is it, like oh my god.
and you know this is coming obviously after a time after the post lockdown era where that isolation bit is still fresher in some people's minds than others, but the idea of like, no, we all can connect with this now because we all know what it's like to be isolated. Even, and I point out the family dynamic here too, which is
like you
great.
Can feel isolated with a bunch of people, which I
exactly. They showed that very, very effectively, and the idea of like, okay, well, Miles Dad and Rio, they're together. They're like, if you're like, oh yeah, they're locked down together, I'm like, they're isolated from each other, even within that own unit and that space and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's the idea of isolation within this, showing the different forms of it, not just like, oh, you're being bullied, Peter Parker, like one-dimensional aspect of, oh, you're isolated for a scene and then whatever, you get to do it. This is so amazing, the storytelling of every aspect of it. But the important thing is that isolation and the yearning to be with some people, right? And how the villains don't yearn to be with other people. The villains,
well, I mean,
like kind of stay by themselves.
I lost my family. I'm assuming a significant other, like something like.
Well, yeah, he was rejected.
Look at me because I don't have a face, so no.
Yeah, they were laughing at him.
So he does yearn to have that connection. It's just what he did with that, right? So like. That's why I specifically like the Captain Stacy character as well, is that like you see a form of like isolation where it's like, oh, so you lied to me, and that and his initial reaction isn't a great one. I'm willing to give him the grace of like, you know what, like he's human still, like maybe he doesn't have all the tools, he doesn't, like no one does, but like
no one does,
but like it's like, yeah, he eventually got there though, like because he realized the feeling he felt of being betrayed that way is nothing compared to the isolation of literally not having your daughter with you for months.
100%.
It's like, okay, I don't need to be the captain. I don't need any of that shit. I just need you. So
I need my family.
While you were talking, I already made the decision to quit. I'm out. Because again, he felt the isolation. He did the one thing of try to do the power play of like, oh, and how could you lie to me? And I'm gonna show you. And then he's like, or I could just use this as an opportunity to just reach out to my daughter and connect and keep her in my life. Which is why I said Spot is a bad guy, because he's not like, yes, I get that there's some circumstances where he feels rejected, but like he does live in a universe where there's a Spider-Man. Like there is a way to find community at some point, like or try to try, and it's like, well, no, I'm gonna just go to a life of crime, and he says I'm doing a life of crime. I am. That's what I got pushed to. So it's like, yeah, you're the bad guy. Like, and that's fine. Like, you'll be dealt with.
That's your decision. That's fine, and that's the reality, is that heroes and villains have the same origin story. They just make different decisions, right? And this is a very clear-cut case of this. He made a decision to be the villain, and he's doubling down, and he's like, here's how I can amass more power and respect and all that kind of stuff. But what he's looking for is love and belonging, and what he's getting instead is fear and power, right? So,
well, I mean, I think
he's
clearly made the decision to not go for love and belonging. I think he makes a very real decision, but or I can just take it away from everyone else. Like,
True.
Like, I don't have it, and now I can make everyone else upset. Like,
right, because he's clearly trying to take it from Miles and trying to, do the villain
and when
nemesis
you see the
thing.
Visions and stuff, it's like he's hurting other people, not just Miles, obviously. So it's like, yeah, he wants other people to feel as bad as he does, instead of desperately trying to like make something good out of it.
Exactly. It's wild to look at how not only isolation impacts people on a spectrum too, because seeing Rio isolated in Earth 42 toward the end, where like Miles is having this giant huge speech and like doing all this kind of stuff, she's so isolated at that point because Dad's gone. She's completely isolated, and obviously that Miles is like crime Miles and all that kind of stuff, right? So her isolation, her hope, everything about it, it's like you see where it takes someone, like that deep depression, all that kind of stuff. She's barely even there. And compared to the Rio that does have the husband and all that kind of stuff in that universe, it's like it's a completely different thing. It's completely different.
Yeah, I enjoyed the exploration of isolation in this, and yeah, it's called Spider-Verse, so you think it's a bunch of people coming together, but it's like, yeah, you can be in the same room as someone and still feel isolated. Like, you still feel like you're alone.
They do a very, very effective job of that. I think, I really want to pull. I don't know about you, but I really appreciated that scene with the guidance counselor. And they're like, oh, yeah, he got a B in Spanish. And I'm like, it's so funny to me because it's like, my mom did the exact same. She's like, you got a C in Chinese? How could you possibly? And I'm like, look at the way we speak Chinese to each other. This is Chinglish, right?
Yeah, like,
why would you
speaking?
Like,
I'm not going to try at that. Like, I mean, that would be my as someone who's not bilingual or
Yeah.
multilingual, I can only imagine you'd be like, whatever, I know how to speak Spanish or I know how to speak Chinese. I'm like, I'm gonna try at that.
Yeah.
And it seems like you have a similar thing to Miles, where it's like we're doing a hybrid thing here. We're not actually like going
No, but
deep.
that's the funny thing is like she blames him for not knowing Spanish, but she does it in Spanglish.
Mhm.
And I'm like, this is why you're reinforcing it and you don't even know. You're just reacting out of your own shame that you didn't impart the cultural things that you wanted to your kids as well as you wanted to, and all this kind of stuff. It was just a really, really fun moment. I'm like, yeah, I've been there before. Great, great stuff. I love it. This movie just speaks to me on many, many different levels. It's so good. And I think one of the more effective things that I miss about that I think I appreciate about Miles's character much, much more than Peter Parker ever did as a teenager is experiencing the teenage issues that Miles has over Peter. Because Peter's teenage issues, he keeps making decisions that keep him in isolation, right? Miles's issues are just how isolated he is and how he can't reach out to other people. And I'm like, that's so much better to me. And I love seeing that from a teenage perspective, as opposed to Peter's thing, where it's just like,
I like
I
the
can't
Tom
talk with
Holland
my best
stuff.
friend.
I think they did a good job of being like, he's isolated because like his bully loves Spider-Man, but he can never be like, but I'm Spider-Man. You are like actively being like, what the fuck? Like, okay, like I have to put up with this shit. And then like I remember in Homecoming where it's like, hey, let's all like ditch studying and go to the pool, and he's like, I gotta go fight the vulture. Like, I think that part of it, and obviously it's not the same, but like I felt those things were like, hey, everyone's gonna go do something fun, but my parents aren't gonna let me. Like the responsibility I have is stopping me from. I mean, like I still think that they did a good job of grounding that in the Tom Holland ones, but I think we did it during our revisiting, right? Like it's not necessarily a fault because I don't think that Sam Raimi ever really cared about this high school stuff. He's like, whatever.
I don't think he did.
It happens in high school. I'm all about the Ditko, just like crazy stuff. Like, and Amazing Spider-Man. As the years are going, I just do not care for those movies. So like, I'm not going to be able to properly represent them. I think that they tried, but they were also in a hurry to get him out of high school because people didn't really want to deal with what it would be like to actually be that kid that has to do all these things.
Right.
And that's fair, whatever. We went through those waves of Spider-Man, and I think we're in a good place. Well, not Tom Holland anymore, but I'm fine with that because we did 3 movies of what it's like for him to be that kid in high school. Trying to do that, we can move on from that now, and now we've got Miles' story as well. Yeah. And I think they're doing a good job of like really, obviously the Miles benefit is he's not a white kid. So like, if you're not white, you can see a lot more of yourself in him. You don't have to be Black or Afro Latino. You just, as you said, you've had many connection points with Miles. Without being Afro Latino, and
just first generation immigrant kind of like being in 2 hybrid cultures. There's so much storytelling there that like everyone that has an ability to connect with. It's like, I know what it's like to have to speak a different language at home, but then at school do something different. It's completely wild, you know. It's the fact that they have that on screen is what I love.
Really have a mom tell you, I'm hoping that I've built you up enough that the world doesn't make you feel like you don't belong. Like that's what I mean about the like not being white, because I get that you can still feel that as a white parent. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm not trying to downplay that, but I think we all understand that there's a much more poignant meaning to that when you're not a white kid and you're a parent that has these fears about what happens to your kid when they're out there and you can't when they're in New Jersey and you can't protect them from Brooklyn.
Yeah, because it's just like her fears are like, I legit hope nothing racist or like shitty happens to him, versus like a white kid's like, I hope he makes friends, is like the scale of difference of like what would happen.
And
right?
I'm not saying it's not
both
important.
worrying.
It's very good parenting to want to instill that confidence in your kid. It's just
it's just reflective of the privilege that comes with race. That's all.
Yes, and that like the same way that if you show a certain amount of confidence as a Black kid, as a Chinese kid in a white supremacist world,
You get knocked down.
you're inviting more venomous people trying to make you feel out of place. So
Yeah, you
that-
invite more hate. Yeah.
So yeah,
for sure.
I think that is definitely, as you said, like how I connect with Miles a bit more. But I still do like the Tom Holland one because I think
Oh,
if they're
100%.
just doing the kid stuff, yeah, I think he does that well.
Yeah.
But this one, obviously, there's so much more, which is obviously why I cried at certain points in this movie. It's just
Oh,
being like, oh yeah,
100%.
like this is the shit right here.
Right. There's one thing about this movie that I really want to specifically ask you about. When Miguel was going through the explanation part about like, here's why we exist, here's the Spider-Man, here's the whatever. It felt to me that they're establishing that Peter B. Parker is the grown-up version of Andrew Garfield. Is that what you got from this too? Because the Joe, who I watched this with, we're questioning whether or not they were making that inference because they were like,
No,
yeah, because the Peter B.
live
Parker was like,
action-
yeah, that was hard for me or something like that.
Live action people stay live action, as we saw when Donald Glover
Right.
shows up as
Mhm.
Aaron Davis, and they're like,
Great
"Look,
cameo, by the way."
Spider Punk got it. I was genuinely not expecting it and being like, holy fuck, like that's such a great,
Exactly.
like these movies do such a great job of like weaving everything in. Like
Mhm.
I know it's a throwaway line and it's used way better in the movie than it was in the trailer of like, and
Yep.
don't get me started on Doctor Strange and that nerd from Earth, like
Mhm.
shitting on Tom Holland, but like it was just
Mhm.
like, oh, like it is all connected and they're doing
Yeah.
it in a way that doesn't like fucking Morbius. Like they didn't do it like that. Like and it's the same company, so I don't understand how they're not able to figure it out. To be fair to Morbius, there was a break and they didn't know what was going to happen and they wrote themselves into a corner. But like so I can all I can say is, yeah, they had the benefit of time passing to be like, okay, all right, we know how we fit into this because they went to the Venom universe. It was really fun, and it was just
That
like,
was great.
It's all connected, and none of it is like, well, that's gonna interfere with this canon. It's like no, like it's just all
No,
different universes. Like,
It's all parallel.
But the one thing that I did notice was, if you're animated, you're animated. If you're live action, you're live action. That's the whole point
Right.
of showing Andrew Garfield
Mhm.
mourning Uncle Ben. Like you just wouldn't have him in the movie if you were trying to
Right.
imply that, hey, this is I think it's just no, Peter B is Peter B.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, because
it
that
is
is
what it is.
legit what I was trying to figure out. Because I'm like, there's a lot about that they're trying. It seemed to me that they were trying to infer, but to me, I was like, no, there's a reason why they're live action and human, and they're
like,
doing
they didn't-
that.
It's not like, oh, we're in an animated movie, so
Yeah, we have
you
to
know,
animate
no,
everything to
it's-
be
no,
consistent.
like,
Yeah,
if you're live action, then you're live action, and we're
Okay.
gonna show it.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay, there was a lot of weird interpretations. By the way, yeah, glad that we brought that up. That Donald Glover cameo was genuinely the most surprising thing to me because I'm like, oh man, not only did he cameo, but they gave him a suit.
Yeah, like
That was
he's
awesome.
in the Prowler suit.
Yeah.
It's rude to
And-
stare.
Yeah, it was everything about that was just like it was so beautiful. So I don't know if we're gonna see Prowler later on, or they're gonna commit to that, or if that was just whatever. But
Well, they said
I
they're
love
doing a live action Miles Morales, so
they did say, well, yes, they did, and well, now everyone's theory is like after the third one, he jumps into the live action stuff, which would
they won't,
make a lot
'cause
of sense. But I
animated
don't
stays
think they will.
animated. Live action is live action.
Yeah, because I'm like, why would they at that point? I'm just like,
Yeah, just
keep
keep
this
doing this
trilogy as this trilogy, and then just do a Miles thing, and then
Yeah.
let that Miles interact with Tom Holland.
They've
Cool,
like,
whatever.
yeah, people won't be like, wait, how could there be more than one? Like they get it now. Like
Yeah.
if you're watching these movies, you understand there can be more than one.
Yeah, 100%. Now we can do the two Batmans at the same time.
Well, I guess we're doing that. We're doing
I'm
that
joking.
next, so well,
But that is going to be funny because a lot of this, I'm just like, there's a lot of story and plot points here that are a little bit similar to Flashpoint that are
well,
out of
yeah, like,
sequence.
you know, you could ruin a world if you try to go save your loved
Yeah,
one. But
yeah.
I mean, we'll see.
I think it's going to be interesting what happens with that episode and if whether or not there's going to be points of comparison here. I'm genuinely curious because I'm like, there's a lot of Flashpoint elements here. This is great. I like it.
Yeah, I liked that, and as I said, I really liked that Mahershala Ali came back. I was so
Yes.
happy about that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's now that we've talked it through, I'm glad they made a point of being like, no, we're not doing animated versions of Andrew and
Mhm.
Toby. They're right there. You
Yes.
see them. They're on
Yep.
screen. That is what they look like. And then again, a joke bit, but it
Mhm.
helps establish a way of reading the movie, which
Mhm.
is Donald Glover, Aaron Davis is in it, as well as animated Aaron Davis. So they didn't do like
Yes.
it's like no, this is the guy from, well,
Mhm.
I'm assuming from MCU, but he doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be
My
technically.
assumption is it's MCU
It would
as
be
well.
better if it was,
Yes,
because of what they
100%.
want to do with Donald Glover in
Yeah.
the other universe, like with him being not Dazzler. He's something stupid.
He's
He's got some movie coming, or maybe they just did
yeah.
that to throw people off. Either way,
I don't think so, because the way they're talking about the way I looked into that character, I'm like, I think he could actually do that to be a really, really cool thing, but like not with Jazz. Maybe with Jazz, I don't know. Like, but it was really interesting to me. I'm like, wait, really? They're getting him to do that Spider-Man character? Maybe it'll work. I don't know. But
well, either way, I think that was great. And yeah, at first I was like, not really into like showing the live action footage of it. But there's like,
Yep.
no, that helps establish something. And also
It does.
you just,
Mhm.
yeah, like they're showing that it's all connected, which I just said I liked. That it's like,
Right.
this is all stuff they're aware of. But it doesn't mean that contradicts something from those movies or these
Mhm.
movies. It's just all
Mhm.
stuff that is happening at the same time. Miguel
Mhm.
is aware of it.
Yep. Yeah. Very excited for the next one, obviously. I really fingers crossed for personally for me for Nick Cage to come back now that we
He'll be
see
back.
Spider-Man Noir.
100%.
For that. I really, really hope so. I get why they're like, oh, Nick Cage isn't in this one. I was like, I get it now. I'm like, okay, I get why. Because you can't put him in this and expect him to be doing what, like,
I don't think he would serve the story properly as you. I think
exactly. He would need too much time, and it would just disrupt things. They use basically Ben Reilly, Scarlet Spider, in a very, very effective and similar way.
And he doesn't have to be a good guy, so you don't have to. Or,
Exactly.
I mean, again, none of them are. I don't think they're villains. They're just doing what they think is the right thing.
Exactly. And I
but
think
you don't
that's
have to
what's
spend too
interesting
much
about
time
it.
with him. So
Correct.
then you don't have to be worn down by it. But like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And here's the other thing too. My friend Joe that I watched this with, he pointed out something very, very, very interesting. Be on the lookout for Madam Web, especially because they're doing that Dakota Johnson film with her, right?
Mhm.
But I'm pretty sure with the web of all this kind of stuff, it's going to have to tie back to Madam Web at some point. And I think that's he made a very, very good prediction. I'm like, yep, I'm going to share that on the podcast. It credit to him. I think there's going to be a Madam Web kind of appearance somewhere down the road, and that might be a live action character. We'll see if they want to promote that movie, or if they're just like, nope, we want nothing to do with that garbage. You go over there with Morbius.
It seems like they're happy to join everyone. Like, it didn't bring the quality down that they went to Venom verse or anything like that. It was just
right.
Like, no,
also didn't talk about Morbius though, so they're picking and choosing what they want to acknowledge, and I'm happy with that.
They're the same universes, so technically they did go to Morbius's universe as well.
I suppose you're right, but I mean, like, just don't remind us of Morbius. Is all I'm saying.
Well, I mean, because I think Venom is more closely tied to Spider-Man than, and again, it's not like he appeared.
Yeah.
It's just like people know Venom and Spider-Man are more closely connected than Morbius and Spider-Man.
Yeah, and I can imagine Jared Leto being like, "No, I'm going to turn a 5-second cameo into a like 30-page kind of script rewrite because I'm Jared Leto and I'm going to be in character for an animated movie." I would love that. That would be great. All right, let's see him pull that off.
Let's give this movie a rating. I'm gonna go with a 10. I really thoroughly enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, we're right. I'm right there with you. I think one thing I forgot to talk about here, with the isolation and all that kind of stuff, the music in this, I noticed one thing that it never let up, and it complemented the artwork, the visuals, everything, and it made the emotions so much deeper. It was wild. I love the soundtrack. Like when Rio and Miles were on the rooftop having that talk, the note drops on Rio. It's just, oh, you really felt that isolation, those pauses in the beat and all that kind of stuff, waiting for Miles to actually respond. Like that whole, oh my God, everything about that was so damn effective.
That's why I'm giving it a 10. I'm assuming
absolutely
a 10 is everything's working.
Everything's working.
Well with this.
it's one of the few movies to me that's like, yeah, I know this is a half movie going in and I'm gonna have to rate it full, and I'm like, no, I'm perfectly good watching this every single time, being like, nope, I know it's a cliffhanger that it ends up with, and I'm looking forward to that cliffhanger because it's such a damn good cliffhanger that just really establishes what we're doing in the next movie. And the beautiful thing is no post-credit necessary.
No.
That was beautiful. No post-credit necessary for a to be continued, and I like that.
Well, yeah, perfect movie for me. I'm glad you enjoyed it as well. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. We're part of the That Shelf Podcast Network with other great shows like Bad Game Movies. We had Bill on, so you should listen to his episode about Superman 3. Contra Zoom, we've had Rachel on about Batman Forever, and our episode with Dakota is coming. We'll be talking about The Punisher, spoiler alert. And
can't wait for everyone to listen to that one.
And Springfield Googleplex. So please listen to those shows, our show and more shows on TDF or on thatshelf.com. You can go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten if you want to hear older episodes of our show. We're on all the podcast platforms. Our Twitter and Instagram is at TDFSpoiled. Our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. So get in touch with us if you want to talk about the movie, if you want to give us suggestions on what else to talk about, or you just want to say hi. And rate, review, subscribe, share with all your friends on all the podcast places. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.